Welcome to the More Perfect Union After Dark, where we take you behind the scenes to hear what we talk about after the podcast ends, when we kind of loosen our ties, get a little freer with each other, and have some fun. This week we picked up where we left off at the end of the podcast, making fun of Donald Trump, but then things turned serious as we got into discussions of foreign affairs, war, peace, and whether President Trump is up to the task in all those areas. It was a fascinating conversation, and we think you'll enjoy it.
I can't believe Greg did that whole thing about them, shaking hands without bringing up, my hands are too tiny, so I'm not shaking hands anymore.
I was about to say that, but I was like, that's too obvious. I was expecting you to bring up that one.
No.
Well, the reason I got to thinking that about his hearing is because I've also heard rumors that his vision is terrible, but he won't wear reading glasses, and that's why he speaks without notes, because he can't read the notes. A teleprompter, they can probably adjust the size of the font so that he can see it, but so he speaks without notes because he can't see them anyways, and that's why he ends up sounding like he's drunk, because he's just making it up.
Or he's drunk.
Well, that's a possibility too.
Okay, this is Donald Trump, not Boris Yeltsin.
Is it bad that I kind of wish it were Boris Yeltsin?
Hey, Boris Yeltsin drunk ran his country better than a lot of people sober ran theirs.
Yeah. I'm really bummed we didn't get to everything this week. We never got to the Tillerson thing. And,
I did want to get to that.
Yeah, the whole Asian thing. In the declaration in the Washington Post that diplomacy has failed, right before he left to take a nap or something like that. He was not
diplomacy has failed. I'm going to go take a nap. You guys handle it, guys.
Did Tillerson actually say that?
He said diplomacy has failed and that we need to consider other options in regards to North Korea. And it's unclear if it's posturing, to try and get North Korea to chill out, or if he was, using that as a bargaining chip for the increases in the military line in the budget, or if he just, I don't even know what it could be.
If he was just cranky and needed a nap.
Yeah, he might have been cranky and needed a nap. It's a long flight.
If the topic is North Korea,
no, they're nuts.
How successful has diplomacy been?
No,
it hasn't.
There is no.
Yeah,
they've given
it a full 55 days. My gosh.
No, they've given diplomacy in North Korea 25 years.
Yeah, but that's not when the Trump administration speaks. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about
especially with the mounting missile tests. There's only so much room to maneuver that that is left, I think, is part of the issue.
Have we sent Dennis Rodman over yet?
Not recently. Where is he now? Maybe he went over and never came back. I've lost track of him.
No, he's a Secretary of Housing and Human Services.
Right. So Rodman was the height of our diplomatic efforts in North Korea. That was our most successful diplomatic mission.
What was our most successful?
Rodman.
Oh, Rodman. Yes, it was.
Rodman. Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Well, actually, Bill Clinton got two.
Yeah. Right. Well,
got two hostages released.
Oh, you're right. Bill Clinton. You're right.
Yeah. Remember that? He got two
But
journalists
that was under
released.
the previous insane dictator, not the current insane dictator.
Good
so
point.
we have to make allowances for the change of insane dictator.
So when Tillerson says that we've run out of, diplomacy has run its course and no longer works, what does that leave? It leaves war. What else is there to do?
Well, I mean, I think what he was threatening to do, at least what I gathered from the articles I read, was that he wants to increase missile defense or even offensive capabilities in South Korea. There was something that the Japanese premier wanted. I'm sorry that I can't remember the details right off the top of my head. But I think basically he just wanted to kind of arm American allies in the region so that, North Korea might sit on their hands for a little while longer. But they're actually concerned about their intercontinental ballistic missile capability at this point because they've been working towards that for a long time. Whether or not they actually have that capability or whether, they've just got a water gun that goes pum, 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 it's never clear what's real in North Korea because, they're insane. It's there's a fair amount of crazy going on.
I want to ask our conservative friends, do you trust Donald Trump, Rex Tillerson, and their administration to handle the North Korean problem? Do you feel comfortable having the Trump administration dealing with North Korea rather than, let's say, the Obama administration, or for that matter, what might have been a Hillary Clinton administration?
I don't feel comfortable with any of them.
You're right, because I don't feel comfortable with North Korea. I mean, it's okay, because he's insane.
But
so,
no.
I mean,
but come on, I'm not going to let you. I'm not going to let you off the. I'm not going to let you off the hook that way. I want to know whether people feel comfortable with Donald Trump handling this.
If you're asking me, do I think Donald Trump will do a better job with North Korea than Barack Obama did, or that Hillary Clinton would have done? My answer will be no. I don't think they'll do a better job, because none of them are willing to do what they should actually do, which is place a phone call to Beijing and say, look, you take care of your dog, and if you don't, I am going to step in front of the microphones, and I am going to declare that the United States of America hereby recognizes the independence of Tibet, Taiwan, and Eastern Turkestan, and we will support all efforts to make those independent states independence in reality instead of independent in name only. They would fix North Korea in a week.
That sounds good. I don't think diplomacy works like that, DJ. I think that sounds good in a John Le Carre novel.
On a podcast.
It sounds good on a podcast. That's not the way the real world works.
But it's not about just diplomacy, and that's half the problem. People assume, and you just did it, that diplomacy and war are the only two options. There are a whole spectrum of options in between talking and sending in the 10th Mountain Division. And we're not talking about using any of them because, frankly, too many people in Washington have forgotten what they are. And that really bothers me.
And I don't think it helps us to be like, we're never going to war.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I will say, though there are, don't get me wrong, there are grave issues with this approach. That there is nothing saying that we could not in theory work out some sort of agreement that Japan and South Korea in particular are terrified of a nuclear North Korea, especially South Korea, because let's face it, Kim Jerkoff wants to reunify the peninsula, and
and he wouldn't mind reunifying it as a sheet of glass because he's nuts. Yeah.
And so, there comes a point when I have to wonder if, he's going to have ICBMs, etc. Maybe, as painful as it is, we have to, Seoul needs an independent nuclear deterrent so that, if, even if, quote unquote, we're not there and it's, quote unquote, not our war, they are not at risk of being turned into a doormat for this little shit.
And we actually had nuclear weapons stationed in North Korea in the 1980s. We pulled them off South Korea. We pulled them out. We pulled them out of South Korea because North Korea promised that in 1985, when they first signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, they said, okay, yes, we will not pursue nuclear weapons if you will please get your nuclear weapons out of South Korea. And we said, sure. They've been lying to us ever since. They made a promise in 1991 not to break the promise in 1985. They made a promise in 1994 not to break the promises of 1991 and 1985. They made a promise in 2007 not to break the promises of 1994, 1991, and 1985. Are we going to say in 2017, yeah, let's get another promise from these people? Come on.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you would structure it under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but I do think that, maybe some of what's being got at is, we need to adequately arm South Korea to deal with this as a response to North Korea, because let's face it, there has been no ratcheting up of that side of things, as North Korea has constantly grown a bigger and bigger dick that can now reach across the Pacific Ocean.
That is a horrifying image.
Yeah, that's terrible.
I'm imagining
I'm not going to
the
sleep
world's
now.
largest penis crossing the Pacific, and frankly, I want no part of it. I mean, that's like the patriarchy made manifest, and I gotta smash that.
Well,
sorry.
It sounds like something you would see in a manga. In a hentai manga.
Okay, all right. Moving on.
I don't read books with pictures, Cliff.
And I would like to know how come
especially those pictures.
If North Korea is
Definitely not that picture.
If North Korea is such a horrible regime, which it is, then why have we done? And this is not just this is the Trump administration, this is the Obama administration, this is the Bush the younger administration, this is the Clinton administration, hell, this is even the Bush the elder administration. They are all guilty in this. There has been no discussion, no greater publicity for dissidents in North Korea or escapees from North Korea of their horrifying stories. There is no discussion about trying to help dissidents in North Korea and focus on the human rights angle. There has been no discussion about doing this, frankly, to China as well, because China is still the colonial master there. No one is actually talking about using the soft power, whatever, that we can use. No one is even discussing any of those. Have we all? This is something. Have we
that
all
we
completely?
Know of, DJ.
Have
None
we
of
all?
Us are in these meetings.
No, please, come on. Have we all completely forgotten how the Cold War was actually won? It was won by helping dissidents. It was won by helping internal rebellion groups. It was won by letting other people who were willing to fight for themselves fight for us as well, finding them and helping them out. We're not, as far as I know, we're not doing anything like that in North Korea. And frankly, we should be.
In the case of North Korea, at least, there is the problem that whereas you always had a certain amount of, dissident movements within, be it Cuba, Russia, Poland, Solidarity, etc., as far as I can tell, the regime there has done a wonderful job of ensuring that those groups have been gutted. Basically, as far as I can tell, there is no dissident organization. Yes, there are people with dissident beliefs. They're usually called Gulag residents. But especially given that they do the 3 generations policy, that everybody, in your family for 2 generations on each side of you gets sent to a prison camp if you screw up. I think that some of those options are in fact limited.
And they may very well be, but at the very least, the notion that it is impossible to formulate some sort of opposition within North Korea. Yes, it may be difficult. Yes, it may be just a matter of propaganda broadcast from the other side of the line. But I refuse to believe it is impossible. The more ruthless a regime is, the more incompetent it can be when that happens. I mean, for crying out loud, we were able to get dissident movements in Saddam Hussein's Iraq. We can probably do it in Kim Jong-un's North Korea. It'll just take effort.
What? Are you serious? Are you equating?
Yes, I'm serious.
The capacity to infiltrate
and don't
Iraq?
call me Shirley.
Yeah, the capacity to infiltrate Iraq with the capacity to infiltrate North Korea. You think they're one and the same?
I think they're closer than we give them credit for. And I think the fact that we don't recognize that means that's because too many Americans don't actually understand how tightly controlled and how dangerous Saddam Hussein was. They called his country the Republic of Fear for a reason, Kevin.
DJ, the one thing I think you have to consider, though, is that in the case of Iraq, you had 2 ethnic groups which were ethnic/religious groups which were being oppressed by the central government that constituted roughly 80% of the population. You don't have an analog to that in North Korea.
That's admittedly true.
Yeah,
that's true.
And that difference, yeah.
No, I will acknowledge that is the case, but you also have a very large diaspora now outside of North Korea. Admittedly, a lot of it is in northeastern China, where frankly our intelligence operations should be much more active than they are now anyway. So I'm also seeing ancillary benefits from this sort of thing, but. I just refuse to believe that our options are merely the 2 extremes of talking to death and sending in the 10th Mountain Division. That's just not the way the real world works. It just isn't.
Well, we're going to find out how the real world works.
Or some version thereof.
So, I believe I read this week that 1,000 U.S. troops are being sent into Syria by the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Did you guys read that?
Well, it's 400
I
in
read
addition to the ones that are already there.
I read 1,000.
Because there are already a couple hundred who are operating in the region.
Okay, so how do you guys feel about this? Is this ratcheting up to a ground war in Syria?
Well, no, because the 400 who are being sent are artillery, are quote unquote artillery advisors. Okay.
Oh, come on. Let's get beyond the advisors thing.
But technically, they're only supposed to be working in the artillery region. And so, yes, they are going to be a ground war, but they're supposed to be nowhere near. They're supposed to be helping with the artillery. So no, I don't see them.
The Canadian troops in Syria aren't supposed to be near the fighting either, and yet surprise, they're getting shot at too. Look, this obviously is part of a larger military commitment in Syria, which is what Kevin was talking about. That doesn't necessarily bother me. The bigger problem for me is the fact what is going to happen when, because now I think it's more a when than an if, when ISIS is defeated and thrown out of eastern Syria. Do we just step back and let Bashar Assad continue to kill as many people as he possibly can, which, oh, by the way, helped create the vacuum that ISIS filled in the first place over there? Or are we willing to establish maybe not just a quote-unquote safe zone, but actually a temporary rump state in eastern Syria to show the rest of Syria, yes, you can have democratic government in this country, government free of Bashar Assad and all of his killers, and create it as an opportunity to bring genuine democracy, freedom, and just general decency, for crying out loud, to government in Syria. That's what we need, and Trump won't deliver that because Moscow doesn't want him to. So there are going to be more troops in there. It's going to be all about fighting ISIS and getting rid of them. But after that, we're all going to go away, and then it's going to be rinse and repeat 5 to 10 years from now.
I'm going to go ahead and whack a hornet's nest, if I may, and I'm going to say that I think it's time to actually seriously.
Lack of an end game is unique or special.
That's what we did in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
It's what we did in Iraq.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We go in, we get rid of the bad regime, and then we don't do anything. We don't do enough to reestablish true civilization.
I mean, I think it's time to start having a serious talk on some level about supporting an independent Kurdistan.
Okay, let's discuss it.
Yeah, I mean, when I consider the 4 countries that would be affected by an independent Kurdistan directly, you have Syria, which I think you could go ahead and just declare, congratulations, you forfeited the territory because you don't have effective governance over it.
You're very bad at this.
Yeah. Say again.
You forfeited the territory because you're very bad at this.
Yes. In the case of Iraq, they've been increasingly moving towards autonomy, and I think independence there is probably an inevitable long-term outcome, just considering the nature of the ethnic politics of Iraq. You have Turkey, who is quite frankly the shittiest ally NATO has ever had, and I am increasingly of the opinion that basically Erdogan needs to be told, knock it off or you're out. And you have Iran, who is not our ally.
That's not Turkey per se. That's Erdogan. Erdogan and his people are the ones who are really the crappy folks.
Yeah. No, I agree that it is Erdogan. The counter to that is that Erdogan has been elected several times in, if not perfectly free and fair, at least passable elections. Frankly, if he was outright rigging the elections, he would not have gone through that hung parliament a couple of years ago. People who rig elections usually don't let that happen. Hi, Mr. Mugabe, how's it going? So, that is, as far as I can see it, the problem is, yes, there are a lot of good people in Turkey, but the fact of the matter is that Turkey has, made the situation in Kurdistan worse and worse as of late. There have been mounting complaints about human rights violations all over the place in the eastern end of Turkey because of this. And quite frankly, in context, he is at best a horribly unreliable ally.
And I don't dispute any of that. I think the notion of an independent Kurdistan, though, will largely depend upon the political situation in Iraq, because Iraq has the highest number of actual Kurds, I believe, and number 2, it has the most mature Kurdish-only political system, if you will. And I think the problem is going to be that the Sunni and Shia Arabs in Iraq I think they've both used Kurds as their political allies in some way, shape, or form. And the question is going to be, are the Sunnis content to let the Kurds go, or do they want them as an ally against the Shia? And I think that's going to really be the concern, because you don't want to create a situation where the Sunnis feel too horribly isolated in Iraq. Now, it's also going to be dependent. Frankly, it would be easier to do if Assad was out of the way in Syria and you had a government that more reflected the Sunni majority in Syria. That might make Iraqi Sunnis feel a little less worrisome about Kurdistan. Okay, if worse goes to worse, we could do what, say, the Muslims did in India in the 1940s when they crossed over to Pakistan. We could do the same thing and go over to Syria, because Syria is at least a Sunni majority country with a Sunni majority government. It's not going to happen with Bashar Assad continuing to kill anybody that gets in his way.
The one thing I would have to say as a major qualifier there is, okay, I know they didn't, that it wasn't everybody in the region. There are plenty of people who were, very literally trapped in the hell that came about. But these are the same Sunnis who did, in effect, a number of them did throw in with ISIS because of their disaffection with the existing central government. So I think you got a long way to go when they're willing to throw in with the with the blood for the blood god crowd in response.
I wasn't necessarily seeing that. I mean, for the most part, I've seen reports that the Sunni Iraqis who stood with us, when, Bush did the strategy flip in 2007 and went after the Revolutionary Guard Corps, they were largely still with us. They were just Daesh came in from Syria and essentially, just knock them clear out of the box. I mean, I've seen, I think it was in it was a WAPO story from about 2-3 years ago, where a bunch of Sunni Iraqis came to Washington to just basically begging for help because ISIS was killing them, and the Iraqi government wouldn't let them defend themselves. They said, no, rely on the Iraqi military, which at that point was dealing with its own series of corruption issues. It was largely paper tiger. There are, as I understand it, there are Sunni groups that are still with us trying to fight Daesh in northwestern Iraq. But the fact of the matter is, again, what people don't want to recognize is that the greatest recruiter for Daesh has not been us. It hasn't been anybody actually running Daesh. It's been Bashar Assad, because he's basically determined to kill anybody who disagrees with him, no matter who they are. And he is more focused on killing people who disagree with him who are not Daesh or not ISIS than the ones who are ISIS.
And on that note, Greg and DJ, I just saw a headline that said 29 beard and undercut combinations that will awaken you sexually.
I don't know where that came from, but okay.
It's what I'm checking my Facebook while I'm podcasting with you guys.